a true spiritual lesson every week. Really good insights. And I know that we are going to have a colorful discussion this morning with Rick being the one being interviewed.
And setting it up.
And setting it up. Thank you, by the way.
Too many hats.
So, too many allergies. So this morning we have Rick Williamson on the stage. He's already been on the stage performing and singing, and he has a really great personality, and I know you've seen that when you've seen him perform. But he also is quick-witted and has a quick way with words, so you're going to enjoy this communication this morning. We did interview, or I did interview Rick either last summer or summer before, but to tell you the truth, I hit a tender spot apparently, and, oh, thank you, Shelby.
Sorry. I figured I wasn't the only one.
No. Thank you for doing that. I asked him a sensitive question, I think, and it touched his heart and that of the rest of us, and he cried a lot. And so he had asked maybe if he came back, he might be able to finish the interview. But we were extremely touched with it, Rick. And let me ask you this. I don't think I asked you last time, but now, you grew up without a father, is that correct?
Yeah. My father died when I was probably about 5 or 6, tragically on a vacation in Mexico.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah, I had a cerebral hemorrhage, and we had to get him across the border. So from then on, it was pretty much me and my family. My mother did remarry, but I hate to speak ill of the man, but he was 29 going on 12, if you know what I mean. So
Not a real father figure.
yeah. It was great to play hide and go seek with. He was good at it, but don't ask him to help you with anything. That just did not work.
One of the things we talked about was that your mother worked
Yeah.
a lot.
Yeah, if this was, I guess my father died in 57, I'm thinking, 57 or 58. And so at that time, I'm sure some of you are aware that women couldn't get a bank account.
Right.
They couldn't get a checking account. They couldn't sign a mortgage. They couldn't get a credit card. And my mother I'm thinking she was probably 23 or 24, was there with 3 young boys.
Yeah.
And have to make a living. And in a small town, there's no jobs. And so she literally took in laundry. She cleaned houses. I mean, I can't tell you the times I woke up to find in the wintertime, we didn't have a dryer. So she would make a clothesline in the hallway and hang the neighbor's laundry. And you wake up in the morning and go to breakfast. So that was just kind of the way it was, you know.
Interesting. And was she gone a lot?
Yeah. Well, one of the ways she could actually work, we were quite a ways from Las Vegas, probably 140 miles. But at that time, Las Vegas was just several casinos in the middle of the desert. And whenever the casinos would have large conventions, they would send out recruiters to hire women to come in and work as waitresses and cooks and stuff. And so she would spend time in Las Vegas, and it would be like a weekend thing. And so pretty much Betty Kelsey, our neighbor, her and my mom would go to Las Vegas, and her 3 boys and us 3 boys we're pretty much there. You know, I think Lance was my older brother. He was, I'm thinking by now maybe 9 or 10. And so you had a 10-year-old, couple 10-year-olds, some 8-year-olds, just at home for 3 days taking care of yourself. I remember once my mother said, we were talking about the difficulty of raising kids, and she said, well, I did just fine. And she did. I mean, I tried to point out to her, I said, do you realize that if we had been raised today, that we would have been taken away from you?
Right.
That the courts look poorly on a mother being gone for 48 hours with the oldest one home being 10. But that's what it was. That's what she did. You know, she would leave a list of, you know, this is what we're having for dinner. You know, and it was simple stuff. You know, cook hot dogs or, you know, spaghetti and stuff like that. And we would prepare the meals, clean the house, and I guess we were latchkey kids as well as the help.
And your love of blues, we got into it a little bit. Tell us a little bit about when you realized how important that music was to you.
Yeah, well, one of these things, I told you about my stepfather, Mel. My stepfather and my mother fought horribly, you know, and they just did not get along. And it was a thing that would get you up at night and you would leave. And I remember we were outside and they were yelling. And at that same time, a black church had moved into our neighborhood. Well, it really wasn't a neighborhood. It was an unincorporated area. And it was a full gospel Pentecostal church. And I loved to hear the music. I mean, I don't mean to talk bad about a Baptist church, but I was at a Baptist church. And the music there was boring. I mean, not to be rude, but when they sang the Old Rugged Cross, you wanted to climb up there and just say, take me, ready to go. And the Pentecostal church, Church of the Living Waters, I mean, they were having fun. You could hear them, clapping, stomping, singing. And when my mother and father were fighting, I would go across the field to sit near that church and listen. And just thought, that's nice, you know. And I wanted so desperately to go in, but it was like, you know, the 60s. And, you know, what does a little white kid do walking into a church full of black people? I mean, how will you be received? I'm sure they would have been great people, but I just remember thinking of that. And then that music, you grew up just hearing that in the background. And not to speak poorly of my hometown, but there was only one radio station. It was the Caviar Sounds of the High Desert, KAVR. And the music they played made elevator music sound exciting. And so my only experience with music that moved you was the music from the church. And then years after that, I was with a band, a heavy metal band. I didn't like the music, but it was the only band that would have me as a guitarist. And we were playing a job in Barstow, California, at a place called the Katz Club, K-A-T-Z. Well, you can imagine by the name, it probably wasn't a heavy metal club. In fact, it was a blues joint, you know, and our manager did not vet the venues. If we were going to get paid, he was going to send us. And so we walked in, and I'm looking at this club, and on the picture, on the walls are all the pictures of the people that play there. They're all black musicians. And I'm looking at this going, And I'm looking at the bartender's a black man, the waitresses are black, the pictures. I'm looking at my lead guitarist, Ron, I'm going, we're in the wrong building. You know, this is not going to go well for us. And, you know, we started to play, and then the audience, you know, there's not a white person there, and we're playing Led Zeppelin and Uriah Heep, and they're getting angrier and angrier. It's because they paid to hear us, you know, and pretty soon just one guy walks up and goes, come here. He goes, y'all are in trouble. He says, if you keep playing, you're going to get hurt. It's like, what are we going to do? You know? And it just so happens, him and 3 of his friends were a blues group that had been trying to get a job at that particular club. And he goes, tell you what, order yourself a pitcher of beer, sit down, and we'll take over from here. And that was the first time I'd heard live blues music, and I was enthralled. They were great. Mm-hmm. And they did a great job, and we endorsed our check over to them. Oddly enough, they had a job at a place called Club San Moritz up in Wrightwood, California. And they were going, we're not going to go over well, because it was basically a white country club. And they said, tell you what, when you get there, tell them, and I can't remember the name of their, but tell them that you are so-and-so. And we took their job, and we ended up going back to that club several times, and they ended up as the house band for the blues shot.
Interesting.
So just one of those little things that just happened in life that was kind of cool.
And how did you end up going to college and making that work?
Well, after I got out of high school, I went to a community college. California is lousy with community colleges. I mean, they're in every street corner just about. And I worked, and I took, I think, 3.5 years to get my associate's degree. And I remember the day I'm getting it, I'm kind of like, I want to go to college, but I looked, the closest 4-year college was San Bernardino State University. It was, by the California system. But it was 40 miles from my house, and I was kind of depressed and thinking, okay, how do I finish this? How do I do this, And Dr. Danielson, this is where I learned that the world or Lord puts people in your way to help you. And Dr. Danielson walks in and goes, Rick, you look kind of down, and you think you'd be excited. You're getting your diploma, you're graduating, you have your associate's degree, life is opening up for you. And I went, yeah, well, it's got its own problems. And he goes, meet me in my office in about an hour. So I said, okay. So about an hour, I go to see Dr. Danielson, and he walks in and goes, well, what's the problem? I go, well, for me to finish the remaining 2 years of my bachelor's degree at the rate I can take classes, it's going to take me at least 8 years, because I can only take like maybe 6 credits. I got to work. And Dr. Danielson goes, 8 years? That is a long time. Wait, Rick, if you don't finish college, how old will you be in 8 years? And I'm like, I'll be like 29. And he goes, ooh. Wait, but how old will you be in 8 years if you do finish college? I said, I'll be 29. He goes, that is fascinating. And I sat there going, what? And he just walked out. I went, I thought you were supposed to help. And then slowly I'm like, oh yeah, okay, I get it. And so at that point, I got a job assistant managing a dinner house in Ventura, and there was a college there. And so I took a couple classes, and then I ended up working in San Diego, managing a couple restaurants down there, and I took some classes. And at that point, I realized I could plan my own course, and I couldn't get all the courses I needed in any length of time at one college, but I was registered at Point Loma Nazarene. That's where most of my classes were. But there was also San Diego State University, University of San Diego, California. And I'm like, well, and so I got everything, and I thought, well, I need a trig class, and they don't offer it here, but if I have to wait till next time it's offered at Point Loma, it's going to be 2 years. But they offer it at night at San Diego State University. And so I had credits from 3 different universities, and it did take, I was about 28, 29 by the time I finished. But I remember when I went to apply for my diploma from Point Loma, the dean called me in, and I'm like, I had no idea why. And he goes, well, you're applying for graduation. I said, yeah. And he said, well, when you came here, you had credits from Victor Valley College. But now we're looking at, you have credits from UCSD and USD. I said, yeah, I do. And here, and I said, they all transfer in, right? She says, normally we get those before you come. I said, I took them at the same time. So, but is there a rule for when you can transfer credits? Well, no. And I said, do I have enough credits to graduate? He said, yes. And I go, okay. And so but he had to approve it because it was just unusual, but there it was. I had my degree and I became a teacher. And yeah, that was an interesting, getting my first job as a teacher. I was waiting on the sub list because San Diego Unified's a big district. And first day I'm in my little suit and tie waiting, nobody calls. Second day I'm waiting, nobody calls. I'm like, wow. And at the time, I had friends that were teachers for the district. They go, well, it's going to take them a month to get your papers filed. And, and I thought, well, that doesn't sound right. And at that time, there was a movie called How to Succeed in Business Without Really Trying. And the thing is, this guy just shows up, says, this is my office, and sits down. So I'm thinking, okay. So I get dressed up and I go to the 4100 Normal Street, the district headquarters, and I walk in and I'm going, I'm looking for the sub desk. And they go, it's back there. And I walk back and I go, I'm trying to find a file for a Richard Williamson. And they go, oh, it's not here. I'm going, oh, well, they want to get him a job. They being me, I don't think I was lying. And they said, well, check at personnel because it's probably still being processed. And I go, okay. And so I walk out, and at that point, George, I can't remember his last name, but he was the head of personnel, and I knew him through mutual friends. And he just looked at me, and I'm like, hello. Walked back to personnel, and I said, I'm trying to find the file for a Richard Williamson. And she goes, oh, here it is. And I go, we need to get this to the sub desk as quickly as possible. And she goes, oh, she stamps and she signs it. Yeah, it looks fun. Here, can you run it over for me? Absolutely. I walked my file over, sat it down, and next day I got a call for a long-term sub job. A guy named George Triforos or something had shown up to sub, and it was a makeup class where you have too many fifth graders, too many sixth graders. Everybody send your best students to this class. And I walked in and I thought, okay, I'll figure this out, how to deal with these people. And and what sealed it for me was that year, the district was negotiating a contract. And there was a big meeting at the district offices where all the teachers were supposed to show up and, to have their demands, and then the superintendent would make his pitch. And so, teacher after teacher goes up, well, we work so hard and we spend so much of our own money and we do this and we do that and we deserve a raise and blah, 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 blah. And I hate to sound negative but it's the same pitch every year. And so then at that point, the superintendent, Pezant was his last name, started to speak, and all the teachers stood up and walked out. And I thought, that's rude. It is. It's just, yeah. I said, they've listened to us for an hour and a half, And so I was the only one in this auditorium of like 300. And Mr. Pezant's up there, and he looks at me and he goes, didn't you get the memo? And I go, no, I didn't know this was going to happen, but even if I had known, I wouldn't do it. It's just rude, just from my point of view. So if you have anything you'd like me to take back to my staff, I would be happy to. So he sat down with me and we talked a little bit. I got back to school the next morning, and my principal, Wanda Walker, called me and she goes, you just got a golden ticket. They offered me a contract.
Really?
For the next year, yeah.
Cool. Cool.
So, yeah. Yeah, like I said, opportunities come your way. And so after being a temporary substitute for 2 weeks, I got a contract for the next year, and
My
yeah,
goodness.
I worked for them for 7 years.
Wow, that's wonderful. But your intuition told you,
Yeah.
this is rude, and I'm going to sit here, and,
Yeah.
that's
I
good.
just, and it was odd because you're sitting there and as the people are walking teachers, like, come on, we gotta walk out. I'm like, no, and just, you just, when you see something that you know is wrong, you just stay with it. So that's how I became a teacher. And,
Interesting. And then the book, what you took from it was that you could sit there and not have work for
Yeah.
3 months while they processed your file, but you had the choice to
yeah, that
do
was from the
something.
movie. I saw the movie. I thought,
Oh, the
what's the worst
movie.
that would happen? I mean, the worst thing was, get out of here, They don't know who I am. There's like 900 teachers in San Diego Unified. And I thought, well, let's try it. Let's just see what happens. I'll just walk in. And I remember the head of the personnel, he would try, I forget his name. He saw me and he knew me. I had dinner with him a couple of times with some friends. And he's just like,
What's he doing?
I have a feeling he thought, well, the guy's got gumption. Let's hire him. What's the worst that could happen?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You taught for a lot of years,
Yeah,
didn't you?
I taught for 7 years there, and then I got a job in Soda Springs, and my plan there was just to go to Soda Springs, small town, teach in the big city, and just and I had vacationed up in the Bear Lake area, Bear Lake, Idaho, and I applied for all the schools that I knew about, but I never got any calls. And I'm at home, I'm back in San Diego, and I get a phone call, and it's the Shauna Parker. She was the secretary of the school, and she said, is this Rick Williamson? She goes, I understand you have a teaching credential, and you're credentialed in both math and science, and then elementary. And I said, yeah, who is this? Oh, my name is Shauna Parker. I'm the secretary for Soda Springs Junior High. And we would like to have you come in for an interview. I'm like, well, that's going to be hard, because I was up there for a month, hitting all the places, Bear Lake and Lake Town, and I said, I didn't even know you guys existed. I didn't even know what Soda Springs was. And I said, tell you what, I have a tape, and I used to tape, old VHS 8-track. I used to tape my lectures so I could analyze them. What did I do right? What did I do wrong? I said, I have a tape of some of my class presentations. Let me mail that to you. And if you like what you see, then I would be happy to get up there as fast as I can. But I don't want to just, quite frankly, I mean, it's 1,800 miles round trip. It's a long, not going to the corner for a meal. So I sent the tape off, and about 2 weeks later, I get a call from her, says, well, if you're interested, we'd like to offer you a job. And I thought, is this, first off, is this real? Because I don't know where Soda Springs, Idaho is. I don't know Shauna Parker, and I've never heard of Soda Springs Junior High. So I don't want to quit my job and move my family, And so she said, oh, absolutely. She says, you can call the district office and, and talk to Larry, can't remember his last name, Lawrence Rigby, the superintendent, and verify that, yes, you don't have to come in and fill out the paperwork, but our first day is like August 23rd, and, we'll expect to see you there. And I thought, wow, I just got hired from a job at a school I didn't even know existed. And so when I got there, I asked him, I said, I'm curious, how did you get my application? And she goes, oh, well, these are a whole bunch of small communities, and so you apparently had left it at Bear Lake, and you left it at Lake Town, and, Georgetown, and Fish Haven, and I think it was Bear Lake sent it up to us because they thought you were a pretty good candidate, and they didn't have any openings, and thought we might. And I thought, okay.
Interesting.
Yeah, so I ended up getting hired. I worked for them for 22 years. Yeah, my original plan was to just stay there for like 2 or 3 years, and then I wanted to do international schools. And I thought that would be kind of cool. But I just kind of became part of the community of Soda Springs. And
Wow.
Yeah, 20, I remember my last couple of years there, I'm teaching the students of people that were my the children of people that were my students. There was one girl, Ricky, I can't remember, Ayers, I think was her last name, when she was my student. And, you know, my first or second year there, I'm teaching and I'm asking questions. And I like to joke with my kids, and I'd ask a question and Ricky had raised her hand and she goes, whatever the answer was. And I go, you know, Ricky, that's a really good point. And I try not to tell people when they have a wrong answer, but if I did, that would be it. And I was trying to be light and airy, and she just broke into tears. And stormed out, and I thought, oh my God, what have I done? Well, that day after school, her mother, her father, my principal, the superintendent comes in, and I'm like, I didn't mean to do this. Oh no, we just want you to know that, you know, Ricky's really sensitive, and what you said was, you know, you didn't insult her, you know, and we just wanted you to know that there's no hard feelings, that everything's fine. Fast forward probably 19, 20 years later, I have her son in my class. And I didn't recognize the name because she was married now. And he's going, well, my mom, you know, told me what a great teacher you were and how much she liked your class and you did this. And I'm thinking, and who's your mom? And it's Mrs. Whatever the last name was, is the local attorney. And I, oh, okay. And I don't remember. And then she walked in and it's like, Ricky, you're the mother. She goes, yeah.
Interesting. Well, what led you to Unity?
That would be Nancy.
Okay.
Yeah. I have always, everywhere I've lived, I've tried to find a church family. You know, sometimes the fits were good, sometimes not so good. And Nancy knows that I like community, and she had called, I think, who did you call?
No, we found you on the meetup group,
Oh, that was it, yeah.
and you guys have that
The
series,
Course in Miracles.
yeah,
Course in Miracles.
I know he loves to debate. So I figured that would be a great place for him to start meeting people.
Yeah. And so we
Yeah.
attended Course in Miracles. That's where I met Charles and
Yes,
Roger.
Yes.
Yeah.
Bob.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we really liked it. At first, we were just going to go there, just would do the Course in Miracles and then go home. And then slowly we started sneaking into the sanctuary. And
yeah.
I remember the first time I heard you speak. I don't know what you were speaking about, but I remember you had told the story. I think it was the Buddha, about a man who had found a boat and crossed a river. And had drugged this, as going through the desert, and he's dragging this boat, and, you know, why are you dragging this boat? Well, you know, when it helped me cross the river, you know, well, sometimes even something helps you, you have to leave it behind. And I just was really touched by the fact it's the first time I'd been in a Christian church where they mentioned anything other than, you know, God the Father, God the Son, the Holy Spirit, and I thought, I like this place. It seems a little bit more open than normal, and we've been, that was what, 2017, 16, something like that?
It's been a long
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
Yeah, long
So
time.
we're going on, 10 years,
Yeah, great. We're glad you did.
and I am too.
And I think you've done an outstanding job today. Thank you so much. I learned a lot about you I didn't know before.
Well, thank you, and here I am. Matt, should I tell him the story I was telling you about my dad? I told him that my dad died in Mexico. And backstory, when I was teaching health in Soda Springs, we would talk about repressed memory. And I told him this story. I remember when I was dating a girl named Sharon in Ventura, we were watching Chevy Chase's Vacation. And the scene where the ant is rolled up in the carpet on top of the car going through the desert. Everybody's doing that. They're laughing. And I'm getting nervous. I'm upset. I mean, I'm just like, oh my, this is not funny. What? And I'd apologize to my date, Sharon. I said, I've got to take you home. I just can't watch this anymore. It's just, no, I can't. So I take her home. I get back to my apartment, and I called my mother. I'm going, Mom. And while I'm driving, I'm having these memories of that week in Mexico. And like, what happened to Dad? She goes, well, he died. I said, I know that. The fact that he was never at the dinner table was probably a clue. But I said, what happened when he died? She said, well, he died on the beach. He just had an aneurysm and kind of fell over dead, basically. And then we had to put him in a car, and we were down with another family, the Abbeys, and my father, the remains of my father, was in the front car with Hal Abbey, and then the back car was my mother, Pat Abbey, and 5 little boys following through the night, through the same topography as Arizona. It's just the Baja California. And one memory I've had of my father was we're in, it's like a public bathroom, but it's not well appointed. It's just concrete and urinals and, like you would find on the beach in Mexico. And he is yelling and screaming and banging on walls and just furious. And all my life, people that he went to school with talked what a mellow, calm man he was, and he never lost his temper. And I'm thinking, if that's true, why is the only memory I have of him just screaming and yelling and just furious? And so I asked my mom, I said, all my life I've had this memory of him. The only memory of my father is him just angry. And she started to laugh. And I'm like, I'm obviously not getting something here. And she goes, that was the week he died. And she said, we were down there for several days, and for the first few days we're down there, all of you boys were horribly constipated and hadn't had a bowel movement in 2 or 3 days. And he was afraid you would rupture, And I said, wait a minute. You mean my only memory is my father literally trying to scare the out of me.
Okay.
It put my whole life in context.
Okay, well, there you go.
That's a true story.
True story. Thank you, Rick.